So, oh no, wait, I just stopped the broadcast. No, I didn't. Hello, this is World University and Schools monthly business meeting online, and it's March 16th, 2019, and we should have some people join us online in the Google Live group video hangout. Larry Veland is on the telephone, and I'm Scott McLeod, and today we'll focus on the business meeting agenda, which you'll find at World University and Schools blog spot. And one of the things I hope to do today is explore further the role of accreditation for World University and School, and beginning with California state licensing with the Bureau of Private Postsecondary Education. So, Larry, are you still hearing?
I'm still here, yeah.
Okay, great. And no one's joined us in the Hangout yet, but people may. And so one of the first items has to do with attending the day-long state California Bureau of Private Postsecondary Education workshop on behalf of World University and School on February 20th, 2019. Providing World University and School the opportunity to license with the state of California after about 11 years, and having talked with both the Bureau of Private Postsecondary Education, Joanne Wenzel, who's now retired, in 2013, as well as with WUaS Senior, Western Association of Schools and Colleges Senior, in their Alameda, Oakland, California offices in 2013. The two processes go hand in hand, but the Bureau of Private Postsecondary Education's form is a big process. So, Larry, I just wanted to share with you some of the initial questions I have in having gotten started only a little bit with this form. Two of the things I learned at this workshop were that World University and School could only plan to license for 2 degrees, so bachelor and PhD, I think, but not law or medicine, and not. They mentioned only, you know, that we could only license for 2 degrees. So I didn't ask about law or medicine. Typically, it can be specific associations or boards for law and medicine in California, in the US. But that was what they said, so I accepted their focus of 2 degrees, and they mentioned PhDs specifically. Shall I get back to them about law and medicine, or?
No, we're not to that stage yet, but it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. If we go also in the high school international baccalaureate diploma direction, that wouldn't be in their bailiwick either, the CA-BPPE. But WUaS middle school could, you know, accredit a middle school or a high school. WUaS high school could accredit that, which might involve the BPPE as well. But right now, I think we're thinking only of I mean, having attended this workshop, I think bachelor's and PhDs, those were specifically mentioned, are a good first focus. And maybe building on their first licensing information request of, mission and objectives. Would you think that those would be two valuable objectives to spell out? The bachelor and PhD licensing? So we're talking about the California Bureau of Private Postsecondary Education. Item number 7 in their lengthy licensing application asks for mission and objectives. And right, that we have to spell out for them. So
you need to emphasize free.
Yep.
And both the degrees you're talking about.
Yep.
And multiple languages.
So the first item I learned at the workshop was 2 degrees. The second item I learned was that for us, English makes the most sense. I asked about multiple languages. Other people were asking about multiple languages. Other people in the room who were starting schools, there were 25, 26 people, can do multiple languages. But for us, my impression was Diane Archielago had English only for us in mind. So I'm thinking of including, because of that workshop, only English. What does that sound to you like?
I think that violates the whole point. I mean, what's the point of WUaS if it's not the multiple languages and free?
Great. That makes sense. Free makes sense. 2 degrees makes sense. So that was the first item I wanted to bring up. English was the second, and online. Oh yeah, free online.
So I would phrase it to get around their objection is if it's online and automatic language translation, and viable options we intended to.
Great. I think I'll add a sentence like that, but I'll also respond to their question and their workbook. I'm holding the workbook up to the live Hangout on air because this will also be recorded. Is quite lengthy and spells out everything in detail. So I'll definitely look for multiple languages and take in what Diane said and probably, build on the English approach, but put in parentheses multiple languages if that sounds good, if it fits in with the licensing app. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I just think you find a way to manipulate it in there because of the online bit.
Right. Yeah, language is an ongoing question with the BPPE, and she helped provide a lot of helpful language from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. But I think for online distance education will work in their parlance as well. So I think they're thinking in terms of that partly, if that sounds reasonable. And having talked recently with a friend at Stanford, the idea of degrees, in 200 countries is what we've been going on, but degrees in 7,000 languages with automatic machine learning translation could be possible and would be worth putting in parentheses somewhere.
Right.
Does that make sense?
To do it immediately.
Yeah. There's apparently 7,097 living languages.
Every time you give me a number, you give me a different one.
The ethnologue, I think, has been holding steady for a year or two on that. But those 97 languages may have only 5 people in them, but 7,000 might have, 100,000 or more. So getting degrees in all of those could be worth it if it was all machine learning, automated translation kind of a thing.
In practice, there has to be sort of a minimum number of people so that somebody would make that translation available.
Yeah, there's a usability aspect too. I mean, Lydia Pincher at Wikidata, I think, use the if it's useful phrase. If we're planning, for example, a music school, all instruments, each a wiki subject page, in each of all languages, because machine learning makes this possible potentially. Then, so in all 7,000 languages. Yeah, it's ginormous. There is if it's useful aspect. I mean, if we're not going to put a translation of all musical instruments in English into the language of, you know, Cromarty dialect of Scots, where the one brother of two existing speakers died recently. There's no point to that.
My feeling was that you would go to the web page of whatever it is you're interested in and click on what language you wanted.
Yeah, if people go to worlduniversityandschool.org, the languages is one of the first links. Nation states is another. You at World University and School, where students can matriculate and register and apply, is another, and subjects is another. So those are 4 ways in. Does that reflect what you're saying as well?
No, I think that the language went on to be down a level, so that after they selected what they wanted to do, then they would check on what language they want to do it in.
So you're thinking maybe from what exists now, as I think about it, subjects should be at the top. So people should be able to go to chemistry or anthropology first.
Or degree level first.
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're talking sort of across the 2 wings of World University and School, the wings being the free to students degree side, which I have in mind around 200 countries, and then the Wiki Open Schools side, which I have in mind in 7,100 living languages. But having added this additional idea this morning of degrees in 7,000 living languages, that complicates things.
Yeah, it does. I wouldn't go there till you think about it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, nation states. So those 4 right at the top could be still good as they are. Someone could go into their language, read it in their language if there are only 1,000 speakers of them and they don't speak English or any other language, and find, you know, a degree program that would be, you know, law in a Papua New Guinean language that had 1,000 speakers. So they could go in through languages, or they could go in through nation states on the worlduniversityandschool.org page and go to Papua New Guinea as a nation state. It's all interlinked anyway. Those, from what you say, I have it in mind with what exists. Those 4 are key, and they're at the top already anyway. So it makes sense, I think.
Okay, so that's a minor topic, so let's move on.
Okay. So having attended this day-long workshop, we basically, I think, got the green light or the go-ahead basically since 2013 to license with the California Bureau of Private Postsecondary Education, which is momentous. That's a huge milestone for World University and School, so that's great. The parallel step I learned about in 2013 in meeting with WUaS Senior is accreditation. It's a 3-stage process, something like candidacy, I guess eligibility. We apply, pay a fee of, you know, something like $10,000 or $12,000. Candidacy, we matriculate our first class and pay a per student per year fee, and then we have to graduate our first class first, and then we would receive the third stage of full accreditation. So there's provisional accreditation.
Then you have to go for WASC after that?
That is WASC Senior.
Oh, okay.
But that is also WASC Senior. That three-stage process is also runs concurrently with the licensing with BPPE. So what I learned in 2013 is licensing with BPPE could take 2 years, and we begin the accreditation process. But I also learned at the workshop with BPPE that the $5,000 fee is paid every 5 years. So all of that is unfolding. We have to, we'll get the license in to BPPE and then see what happens, if that makes sense. Sort of documenting this in this video as well. So, and Fritz may join us in the middle. We'll see. I'm just checking to see if he's emailed back here. He hasn't. He emailed, and I emailed you and he about 45 minutes ago. So on to item 2. How does that sound? We've already considered in many ways, but a brief clarification of what World University and School is. It's an online university providing free degrees in all languages. And starting with English, and in California, I think we've touched on many of the points of how the licensing application will be the focalizing document. Diane also wanted it to a print copy. She wants us to print and mail it in. I mean, I think getting back to item 1 and questions of both course catalog, which is basically a licensing agreement, an agreement with students who matriculate, where we're going to seek reimbursement from all 200 countries' departments of education, potentially through the website. It has to do with how to make that process more focused. It seems very unwieldy and potentially very an extended licensing process. How to anticipate students from other countries, how to anticipate all the contingencies that might come up as students drop out or take a leave or deal with the web platform in this way or that way. Any ways to make the catalog process from the BPPV perspective easier? Yeah. I guess just try to think of all the contingencies and answer their questions and go through their workbook. The other thing is, you know, as students apply, if they apply for an electrical engineering undergraduate or PhD, what tests are they going to take is an interesting question. You know, for entrance. Okay. And MIT OpenCourseWare just posted in Twitter something about let MIT help with the JEE, which is some electrical engineering exam. And it'll probably be something like that I'll add to the World University and Schools BPPE application, if that makes sense.
Now, let me remind you that we're already in the spot where 1/3 of the colleges in the U.S., universities in the U.S., do not require SATs, or they're optional, and that includes shadow.
Great. Yeah. I mean,
and according to what happened with the scandal this last week,
yeah,
that's going to increase rapidly.
And yet, I agree, and not requiring SATs makes much sense to me. Stanford may have let that requirement go. I'm not sure if MIT has. But there's something to be said for a possible applicant to take a test that might be something everyone has taken. SATs are expensive, the SAT schools are expensive, and maybe a scam or unethical. So I keep getting some emails from other standardized testing folks. CLT might be one of them. Do you think there's, having been the chair of science at Chatham University and seeing their admissions process, a value to having a single across the board entrance exam? Okay.
I mean, my feeling is if they start a program and can't hack it because they wouldn't have passed the test,
yeah,
they just wasted their time anyway, so why would they do that?
Great. Good to hear that you don't see any need whatsoever in some sort of...
I mean, it's nice to have a listing of what their academic background is.
Yeah.
So clearly, if they're 9 years old and still in elementary school, you're going to say no. But otherwise, I mean, it's just a matter of basic minimums to be passed, and it doesn't include a test.
Great. We can communicate further when I get to the item number in the BPP licensing sort of process. But I really appreciate that heads up. The BPP license asks for a lot of specifics in broad scope. So that's a very useful structure, and it's helpful to hear what you have to say as well, Larry. Thank you. So item 3 on the agenda, we pushed back monthly business meeting to the third Saturdays in the month. This is the very first one after quite a few years now. 9 a.m. Pacific time, hour long. We've been fairly consistent with that. And the reason we did that was partly because of a Scratch education, Scratch drag and drop programming language workshop that's been happening a couple of times on the second Saturdays in San Francisco. And I attended last week's, which was edifying and interesting, and very relevant even for exploring standardizing on Lego robotics and also other related hardware and robotics that uses the Scratch 3.0 programming language. Are any of your grandkids exploring Scratch at all that you know of, Larry? I don't. Okay. I know your daughter Emily also went to MIT, and she has an interest in online in education also. I think is that it's daughter-in-law, right. Okay. So Scratch 3.0 is a fairly new development out of the MIT Media Lab, and Scratch education is being developed out of the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And there are a number of reasons why the Scratch drag and drop programming language is very interesting in its ongoing iterations. It's partly kid focused, and it's partly about making as a way to learn a programming language. But specifically, the Scratch 3 programming language has an add-on or extension with many languages in it. So it potentially would be a programming language that one could learn in Spanish, and almost any other language one added to the add-on or extension. Maybe all 7,000 languages could be conceived here. That's invaluable. I don't think there are many other drag and drop programming languages that would allow that. Maybe Blockly will add in.
Feeling among computer scientists is whatever language you're programming is a language in and of itself different than any other spoken language. In other words, it's not Spanish or English, it's Scratch. And you have to learn Scratch, not English or Spanish to use it.
Right, right. Natural languages like English or Spanish or Chinese are different from programming languages.
Right.
But if you're a Spanish speaker who doesn't speak English and you're learning Scratch, that you can learn it in Spanish because of this add-on is is remarkable. Yeah, I think there's even some sort of, I'll call it new theory of learning built into Scratch, which is learn programming from programming itself with Scratch or Blockly or other block programming languages, and not necessarily from a book. Interestingly, so that's I haven't added that to the news and agenda item, that you don't need a book necessarily, but I think that's an interesting development. What do you think about that, Larry?
I think that what I said is most computer science programs are working the way in the world. And even though it sounds good to you, I don't think it's going to take over. I think they're going to have to learn the language.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, if I think you learn with Scratch how variables and arrays and loops and similar work as an 8-year-old, as a 12-year-old, when it's time to move on to Python or C++, or you will have been playing with these structures growing up. So maybe the transition to learning familiar 5-6 decade old programming languages will be easier, starting with Scratch.
I agree with that.
Okay, to be seen. I mean, there's quite a community behind Scratch of programmers too, thinking through all kinds of contingencies in the online space, which I find interesting. So also at this Scratch 3 education workshop in the Exploratorium in San Francisco on Saturday, we played with Microbit, which is a little card with circuits on it, about a third the size of a smartphone, which is also programmable with Scratch. So you can, there's light display as an output, maybe 25, 30 lights, and that's sort of comparable to a computer screen. And you connect it to your computer, you upload Scratch to it, and you can learn all kinds of things about how this mini little computer on a circuit board works. It's less than $20, I think, so much less than Lego robotics we do too at $350 or $400, and Mindstorm's EV3 for something like that as well. So potentially a good starting place. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it a lot depends on the age of the person you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
See, I'm mentally thinking of adults.
So if we have you know, for an undergraduate degree, 18-year-olds in English from 15 different countries this autumn, and those who might be on an engineering track take a course for 15 or 16 weeks with microbit, because there's probably enough you can play around with in that time. Does that sound like an interesting?
I think that's leading you away from the main topic of today and of WUaS in general.
Okay.
I just think that's the SMU developed that doesn't really connect directly with what we're trying to do.
Well, I think I would write this focus of for Scratch 3 and robotics towards an engineering degree for home robotics into the licensing BPP sort of application. But I'll just add before moving on from item 3 that Lego robotics with Scratch drag and drop programming language for home robotics could be developed with Lego Brick Street View, which is.
If we're focused on the school part of the WUaS, I certainly. But if you haven't done it at the age of 8 to 12, like my grandchildren in fact did do,
Yeah.
I don't think an 18 to 20-year-old is going to sit around and want to do that.
Yeah, all right. I hear you. I mean, I think this might be more hands-on than listening to MIT OpenCourseWare faculty with a Stanford or an MIT graduate student in a Google Group video hangout developing a conversation. One of the questions I'm addressing here is how to get hardware into hands of people from their homes.
Okay, so you could reference it
Okay.
there.
The other, and this all gets, you know, this is not only part of an engineering degree, but possibly a computer science bachelor undergraduate degree as well with Scratch. So there is the possibility of even virtual Lego Brick Street View and Google Street View. But then there's even, I only found one reference to, but there's certainly a lot of focus in the world of computing and computer science these days on machine learning. And Google's TensorFlow is modular in these regards and growing by the day. And I only found one reference to Scratch and TensorFlow, but I think that would be a potential interesting avenue and very timely and something that maybe other online universities, whether it be in edX or in Stanford Coursera, would maybe beginning to focus on or haven't begun to focus on yet. I think this approach of hardware and software in multiple languages in the home may make World University and School unique, if that makes sense. What do you think?
Well, we'll have to see how it pays in the next few years. Yeah. I think that computer science has gone through about 6 different fads since I've been active.
Right.
And all of the previous 5 have failed at nothing.
Right.
Including the language you have not mentioned at all, Pascal.
Okay.
For a long number of years, computer scientists predicted everybody would start by learning Pascal.
Huh.
And it's gone. You can't find it anywhere. And that's sort of, I'm more skeptical than you about these new great inventions that come out of computer science departments.
You expressed some wisdom there in your skepticism. I don't know that many other brick programming languages. There are a couple. Blockly from Google might be one, and there may be some others. But what makes it through the test of time, 50 years, 60 years out, you know, I think Scratch having the backing of MIT could.
No, Pascal had the backing of MIT people. Remember, MIT as an organization doesn't back anything. It's people at MIT that's enthusiastic about something.
All right. Well, time will tell.
I'm like arguing that you need to go slower here. You're outracing what the industry is doing. We don't have the background, the preparation to be able to say we can do it then.
Well,
so you're trying to run with people who are way ahead of
Well, I'm also looking for some free online programming software for the autumn for some portion of 500 students, possibly with a robotics side, and possibly where individuals or departments of education will buy microbit and Scratch and buy microbit and Lego EV3 and we do too. So the compatibility with Scratch for learning programming is really from home is interesting. So I'll go slow. World University and Schools going slow. 2013 since we last talked with BPPE. Financial reports, let's see. Just a few things on my side first. We did one 550, I think, for California's reporting on one of our wings, and we did one of 990 federal on the other wing, but I might have to do the others in the other way as well. I have to check onto that, into that. And there's some fees which
I don't know, but I'm not sure. But okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and there's some fees I need to transfer, if that makes sense to you, having paid them already.
Yeah. Okay.
And do you want to give a brief financial report on per the financial reports you so kindly do every month?
Since my computer died a week ago and I lost all the things I actually had, all I can say is my memory is that we didn't change anything in February from the end of January.
Yeah.
So the January report is current and active as far as I know.
Great.
I will catch it up, but first I got to get my computer laptop up and running again.
Right.
The new one.
Great. So that's so further on the finance side, in applying for the BPPE license, I think it'll be $5,000 and then $2,500 in addition, $5,000 over 5 years and $2,500 fee every year. And that $2,500 is due within 30 days of the acceptance of our application. So
okay, we're sort of halfway there.
I think moving on to the National Science Foundation Award, which I think we are receiving, but there's a kind of gray area with claiming it. We would have to try to claim that and get those monies when we need to pay the BPPE.
That's true. Yeah.
And there's a chance that they'd all be communicating with each other in the background.
Oh, I doubt that. Nobody will do any extra work that they don't have to do, and we're talking about state level and federal level, so I doubt that they're doing anything.
Well, I'm just going to tortoise along here with BPPE and NSF Award claiming, and hope things work out. There have been enough snafus with some of this software to make it make me pull into my tortoise shell sometimes.
I know what you mean.
There's maybe having gone to MIT and dealt with programming languages in the late 60s and 70s, you have your own tortoise shell up there. I don't know.
Yeah, my tortoise shell right now is to save money, they're making me download the operating system instead of having an operating system on a new computer. Experience that, yes.
Right.
That's exactly it, because the act is, first you got to somehow prove to the company that you exist online, then you got to prove that you're entitled to it, and it's on and on and on.
Right.
Or I had the option, I didn't know that what I was getting into. I could have paid $125 and had them set it up for me.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's crazy. it sounds like you're on a Windows or a Linux machine. There's an ease of use with it's still a little bit headachy with a Mac Apple operating system, but yeah, I hear you. Not even good reason to be going back possibly decades to be on a Windows or a Linux machine for you, I'm sure. But file compatibility that's decades old is defines one's approaches to future purchase of machines, I guess.
If I'd known what I've discovered, I would have changed it around a little bit. But okay, anyway.
Oh no!
Let's go back to topic.
So I think that covers most of the finance side of things. We still have basically no monies to speak of whatsoever. I guess MIT invited me to a 3-day conference on April 1st, 2nd, and 3rd in just 2 or 3 weeks. But because we have no monies to speak of whatsoever, we can't even afford the airfare. It was a free conference. I'm not sure if housing would have been free or not, but our lack of money, which is now 11 years old, has once again prevented me from attending this MIT conference, alas. So this NSF grant is very valuable in a variety of ways.
Okay.
So item 5, as we write the BPPE application for licensing with the state of California, we're going to have to start developing our platform further. And Google for Education, World University and School is already in. So there could be an avenue with registering matriculating students there. That's probably a fairly sophisticated ecosystem as it is with transcripts. And when I asked Diane about Google for Education, she said, yeah, just say you're doing that and that'll be good for much, which is good news. But also Miraheza MediaWiki, World University and Schools Miraheza MediaWiki, doesn't have any storage yet. They've posted that again on Twitter. That's sort of the same front-end software that Wikipedia uses with Wikidata, Wikibase as a backend, and World University and School is in Wikidata, Wikibase, but our front-end Miraheza MediaWiki isn't connected with the backend. And so when all this comes together for matriculated students with BPPE application, then we may be in a place for planning for registering students towards degrees in all 7,000 languages. So if we're going to plan for coding for that, and possibly in Google for Education, why not plan for all people, 7.5 billion people on the planet, just planning-wise, conceptually, and even with the idea of thinking through a universal basic income. So that would allow everyone to become teachers and learners if we planned for 7.5 billion people. And the connection here with universal basic income beyond this coding challenge emerges partly out of a 2-day Stanford universal basic income talks, both just recently, I think Tuesday and Wednesday, or Wednesday and Thursday of this past week, Tuesday and Wednesday, where Alan Kruger, an economist from Princeton University with a Harvard PhD and went to Cornell as an undergrad, and has just written a book called Rockonomics, Backstage in the Rock Music Industry, was the speaker on Tuesday evening. And on Wednesday, James Ferguson Stanford anthropology professor, Pascal Dupas, Stanford economics professor, French, and Stacia Martin West, a professor at University of Tennessee, who's also the co-principal investigator in the Stockton basic income experiment in the city of Stockton, California, where some Stockton residents, 500, maybe 100, maybe 500, are receiving for 18 months a basic income from the state of California, from Sacramento, of $500 per month, free. And so one of the points that many of these professors were making was that a universal basic income is too expensive.
Oh, yeah. 7.5 billion times any number of dollars is a lot.
And while there was no mention of 7.5 billion people in the two-day panel that I heard of for the universal word in UBI, there was lots of mention of all these experiments and empirically assessing what happens in these UBI experiments. Yeah. And that's great and amazing that there are all these universal basic income experiments happening already that we can study. So the question I asked at the very end of Wednesday morning panel was, what happens if we combine the state of California with all its legal and coding platforms, experiment with Stockton in giving $500 away to the poorest people, as I understand it, in one of the poorest cities for 18 months with a single cryptocurrency backed with blockchain ledger, backed by potentially by 200 countries, nation states, central banks, but in this case, it would just be maybe the Central Bank of California as an experiment and starting place. And what Alan Kruger responded, this is right at about noon on Wednesday, was that he doesn't know cryptocurrencies. He gave a lot of information about the costs of UBI and
the poorest people in Stockton are going to have zero knowledge of what they're talking about.
And yet be happy with $500 a month for 18 months.
But they're not going to be able to walk into the normal grocery store and buy your cigarettes with a Bitcoin.
Well, they're getting it on a bank card. And
but if it's still a Bitcoin on a card, it's not going to be cashable in very many places. I think it's combining two topics, which are nice, but you're just muddying the waters. I'd really like to know what to do with the $500 cash first.
Well, the idea of a universal basic income, there are many ideas, and we heard lots of language, good language on Tuesday and Wednesday, is, a cash transfer with no strings attached.
Yep.
So these Stockton residents are getting a cash transfer, but it's not paper money. It's digital dollar. It's bank card dollars.
All right. Now, I have plenty of experience working with poor people. About 2/3 of them do not have bank accounts.
Right. Even if you don't get, even if you're in for example, a refugee camp of 300,000, some of the largest in East Africa, in some sort of United Nations program or not NGO program where they have a form of scrip, those people don't have bank accounts, but they can be given either paper, scrip, or cash, or bank card if it could be used in those refugee camps. So I think the potential to give bank cards to Stockton residents, even if they don't have anything else, and use those cards in stores to pay, to get groceries or pay rent.
Function like credit cards or debit cards, that's fine.
I think that's the idea. So if with the state of California's sort of support and backing, you turn that computer chip on those bank cards into a cryptocurrency experiment, not Bitcoin, but instead possibly IOTA, which is a trinary or a ternary cryptocurrency that, in contrast to all the other Bitcoin experiments, which are binary, and the whole internet, for the most part, runs on a binary system, ones and zeros. This ternary system, which the MIT Digital Currency Initiative, Nihan Narula, mentions in a recent online talk, has that is in the News and Agenda for World University and School, has the potential to be much more secure. So could you put a ternary, could you turn that bank card, these Stockton residents are getting $500 into a way to facilitate a cryptocurrency experiment in ternary, that even then the 19 out of 28 European Union nation states as state platforms too could then adopt on an experimental basis for, you know, exploring a UBI in those 19 out of 28 countries and in African countries. Interesting possibilities where James Ferguson added very quickly and sharply, right, smartly at the end of the talk, why not at the end of this 4-person panel session, why not turn the Stockton experiment, possibly combining it with a cryptocurrency, into research experiment, into research. So here you might have anthropologists going around the world giving $500 away to a certain small population, and with a ternary cryptocurrency. I think anthropology students would like giving money away. What do you think?
I think the basic principle is KISS. Keep it simple, stupid.
Okay.
It combines two different, completely different experiments, and the people who make that proposal like the idea of cryptocurrency, etc. But to give you just one counterexample, you just said these poor people would take this card in and spend it like a debit card. But that means that people who do get the debit card have to be able to take their cryptocurrency and convert it into cash. And that's not possible these days. I mean, in a way distant future, that might happen. But for the purpose of the one experiment right now is what happens with the universal income. Don't add anything else to it. Keep it simple.
Great. You know, that bank card to something like 500 Stockton residents, $500 a month for 18 months is pretty simple.
Yeah.
Whatever emerges in that computer chip representing some sort of currency, whether it be digital dollars or digital IOTA, will be something the Stockton residents don't care about. They'll be able to buy their groceries.
That's right. They've got to be able to go to a local drugstore and buy their prescription.
Right.
Okay? That means a local drugstore is responsible for finding a way to get it transferred into real cash.
So they put it into, they get their prescription medicines by putting their UBI card into the bank card reader. Right. Yeah. I think the potential to build out with experiments a UBI and even code for, you know, have learners and teachers in all 7,000 languages, potentially, you know, in a Google ecosystem, whether Google Plus, the social media site, where each plus page could be associated with a bank card for people's in the UBI experiment and for teaching and learning. would be a way to keep it all simple with building on existing technologies, and maybe we can study it.
The fraction who don't have access to computers or don't use it, if they have access, is about 50% of the population you're talking about.
Sure, sure. We talked about this some years ago. I mean, World University and School is maybe an argument for giving everyone smartphones and computers eventually, as they might need it. Hoping to keep this on the give away the money and reduce poverty side. One further, I know we're down to 2 minutes. I mean, a universal basic income, if we can code for this at World University and School for 7.5 billion people, is not as progressive as targeting the poor, the poorest of the poor, with a UBI, as Pascaline Dupas mentioned. So the more progressive approach is not the universal approach, but an experimental approach might be a way to target the poorest of the poor with a bank card, and might be able to reach out to related populations for online learning, all kinds of online learning opportunities, including free to students degrees at World University and School. What do you think?
I think it's possible, but you, as usual, go drifting too far into the future. I think we got to be more pragmatic and focus on what's now possible. I'm
holding up into the video again the BPPE licensing book for my tortoise now. Yeah. I'll have some of these things in mind when coding for our platform and thinking about the BPP licensing, and add some of this to the minutes as well.
All right.
Any other thoughts or questions or related before we close?
No.
Maybe Fritz, who said he was interested in joining us, is watching the live stream rather than, since he isn't joined the actual participatory open World University and School monthly business meeting, 10-person live hangout on air. Thank you, Larry. And next business meeting, I think, is April 20th, 9 a.m. Pacific time. Please email info@worlduniversityandschool.org if you'd like to participate, or go to our website. And thank you, Larry, for talk to you in a while.
All right, good enough.
All right, see you for now. Bye.
Bye.